everyone. Welcome to Break the Silence, Break the Behavior, a platform where we discuss the critical issues of research, funding, and the eradication of uterine fibroids with prominent leaders. Today, I'd like to introduce our guest for the day. I'd like to welcome retired Florida State Representative Anika Omphroy, who was the architect and bill sponsor behind the 2022 Florida Uterine Fibroid Research and Education Law that was designed to help women be aware of symptoms and better treatment options for fibroids, which is a condition that affects over 26 million American women. Welcome, State Representative Anika Tene Omphroy.
Thank you so very much, Erica. I'm so grateful to be here to be a part of the program today. And thank you for that lovely introduction.
Absolutely. I'd also like to introduce our second guest, Dr. Jan Katz-Nelson. Dr. Jan is a philanthropist, a business owner, and a highly skilled cardiac surgeon. He's the founder of Fibroid Fighters, and he's established himself as a very strong advocate for accessibility, affordability, and compassion in the delivery of healthcare services. Dr. Jan also oversees USA Fibroid Centers, which treats thousands of patients nationwide, offering uterine fibroid embolization, a non-surgical treatment and cure for fibroids. Welcome, Dr. Jan.
Thank you, Erica.
We're so excited to talk about Florida's Uterine Fibroid Research and Education Law that took effect this July 1st, 2022, during Fibroid Awareness Month. State Representative Anika Tene Omphroy sponsored the bill that required the Florida Department of Health to take an active approach to help women battle fibroids, which are non-cancerous tumors of the uterus. The House and Senate approved Omphroy's House Bill 543, and Jacksonville Democrat Senator Audrey Gibson's companion bill, SB 1010. The bill was approved in both the House and the Senate and was signed into law. Representative Omphroy, can you please tell us why signing this bill, this critical bill, was such a victory?
So this whole process was, it was a 7-year journey, but I have to say it was miraculous to see this legislation receive unanimous support in both the Florida Senate and the Florida House of Representatives. And then to be signed in early into law by Governor DeSantis was a huge win for women across the state of Florida, because what it said was that the Florida legislature, as well as the governor of the state of Florida, were in agreement with the fact that women who are suffering with uterine fibroids need to be aware of what is out there to help them on their journey, and that Florida was willing to put skin in the game by funding it for the next 3 years to ensure that there is actually research and awareness brought to uterine fibroids. So for the first time in 10 years, Florida is building a brand new health database. We haven't done that in 10 years. And this database is focused solely on women who have uterine fibroids. So it was a big deal. I'm grateful to Senator Gibson for being the Senate sponsor for this legislation, and grateful to my 160 colleagues in the Florida legislature for understanding the importance of this legislation to the women of Florida and the women of the United States, because I think Florida is a great example. Florida has such a unique population that I think that the samples or the research that comes out of Florida will be able to help women across our country. And that's just my thought.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And just to give everyone the scope of the retired state representative's background, she served as a member of the Florida House of Representatives from 2018, representing the state's 95th House District, which includes part of Broward County. And also she's a first generation American, Jamaican Haitian American. So I definitely wanted our listeners to know your background as well, and why, your impact is so great on this effort.
So I have to say that that I am lucky and blessed to be in the position that I'm in. I don't think it's by accident that I was the person who had this legislation and was able to get it through the first try, which is not normal for any law, to be able to pass unanimously on the first go round, especially with something that has to be funded. So yes. I'm just grateful to be the conduit for it.
Absolutely. And we're definitely grateful to have you. As Fibroid Fighters, we definitely value the fight of our legislators in this area. My next question is for Dr. Yan. Dr. Yan, how do laws improve healthcare? What's needed to help improve healthcare from a provider's perspective?
Okay, it's a great question. I don't know if all doctors will like my answer. There are certain professions that rely on license and diplomas to provide quality or assure quality to the population that's served by those professions, whether it's lawyers, attorneys, accountants. And the big thing is a judgment, right? To apply the right judgment, know the rules, and make the best decision and execute whatever needs to be done professionally. I think in medicine, in the last 20 years, 30 years, is tremendous shift in so much data readily available and so much innovation. And we see the lag. If we don't innovate, if we don't change anything in the healthcare, there will be this lag between the books that doctors read 20, 30, 50 years ago and today's reality. So I'm very much for the government pushing us to be better by introducing, mandatory initiatives, how to implement the best practices. I think it's tremendous importance for government to do that. And I'm very impressed that the way to do that is to educate the population, educate the customer. So if the other options, because if someone say, 25 years old, 27 years old women come and she gets a recommendation for hysterectomy because her life is very difficult with the 2-3 weeks bleeding a month, she will say, Doc, haven't you heard about uterine fibroid embolization? Haven't you heard about other options? And is that true? After hysterectomy, I will not be able to have kids? So these basic questions will completely disarm and pivot because more than 500,000 women get hysterectomy in the States. So I think thanks to you, Anika, and Senator Gibson, a miracle happened. And I would like, we had a great conversation many months ago with Senator Gibson right after passing this. And I would like you to tell us more. What was the vision behind this database? And I know Senator Gibson said, well, there will be funding, or there's already funding for women to get this, their gynecological exam and ultrasound without copays. But I was wondering if the bill has the vision that it's almost mandatory, women's, the wellness, and every woman, every doctor should be able to recommend that. If they don't recommend, it's not right, and women should be rewarded for, I don't know, encouraged to get the screening, because the ultrasound gives us a diagnosis, majority of cases, sometimes MRI, and that's a uterine fibroid embolization, for example, 20, 30, 40-minute procedure that can be done, and we do it in the office. An hour later, patient can go home. That's all, instead of hysterectomy. So if you can, Anika, share with us, what are the next steps?
So for me, my big thing is that what I did in 2021, to tell you the truth, the reason uterine fibroids awareness month took place in the state of Florida is because I asked my aunt, who was a then state representative, to carry the proclamation designating uterine fibroids month as the month of July. My birthday month is the month of July. It was chosen as July for a reason, not just because it was my birthday, but also, well, that played a part, but also because July had fewer holidays. So we had 4th of July, but then we didn't have any other major holidays in the month of July. And it happens to be my birthday month. And I asked my aunt to ask if we could have July as uterine fibroids research and as uterine fibroids awareness month. And that was in 2015. I still have the original proclamation
Wow.
from the state of Florida designating it as uterine fibroids Awareness Month. And so for me, this has been a 7-year journey to educate women. This is before I got elected to office, before someone gave me a really cool title. I knew that this was the reason that I should run, because what I knew was, me as a woman suffering with uterine fibroids, I didn't have access to all of the information that would have made my decision making different. I believe that if I had gotten an ultrasound earlier in life, I would have been able to make different decisions in regards to when I wanted to have children, what procedures were available to me. For me, I had a traditional myomectomy. I have a huge scar, and I spent 5 days in a hospital. And I had my surgery in 2015. This House resolution took place in March of 2015. And what I was screaming out for was, and my aunt had a hysterectomy in her early 30s. And she was the one who carried this resolution, but she never thought about having a month. It wasn't until my high school friend Tanika Gray Valbrun and we both went to high school together. We both lived in the same neighborhood. My aunt was both of our state reps, and I said, "Hey, let's go have a conversation with her." But it was because of the lack of information, Dr. Yen, because I didn't know that I could have done this, that, or that, and there was no one giving me additional information. I had a phenomenal surgeon, but I would have loved to avoid surgery. If I had known I had different options, it would have been. But because of the awareness month, now you have people talking, and then we're starting to talk to each other. Fibroids Fighter has brought even more awareness to this conversation. You know what I mean? Like, I knew that if I had different information, if I had been told in advance before my uterine fibroids got to the size that they took 31 um, out of me, 5 pounds of fibroids out of me. Had I caught that earlier, had I known of a Dr. Yan, if I'd known about the different procedures that were available to me, I would have taken that option.
So, Anika, how will you know about Dr. Yan? And I'm just saying about all the doctors that do uterine fibroid embolization, because the procedure is known for almost 30 years.
So let me just say this, Dr. Yan. We had to hold off some of those doctors that you were talking about from making it so that it was not just for their particular discipline. And this came at the very end. They tried to make a movement to exclude other medical disciplines from being able to participate in this particular, to be able to diagnose, to be able to, I made sure that, and this, maybe you don't agree with this, maybe you do, but I made sure that anyone who uh, touches a woman or diagnoses a woman with uterine fibroids had to report this data, because we need to understand who has it, how are they affected by it, is it, what are the commonalities between them. So the research part of it is major for me, because I don't think that there's been a full-fledged uh, research on the women. Now, we know there are different procedures, Dr. Yan, I understand that, but I also want to know, what are the commonalities. We now know it's genetic. When I was coming up, they didn't think it was genetic, however, in my family, it was my grandmother, my mother, my aunt, me. We figured out it was genetic in my family, right? But that's big news to me, because 5 years ago, no one was saying it was genetic. They told you it was because of your diet, right? Well, I was raised vegetarian. My hair is not chemically treated. And I have never been over a size. I've never weighed more than 150 pounds. I'm 5'7.5", so it's not my weight, right? So there's a lot of things that they told us.
Anika, we know, I understand people do want to do the research. It's known. I'll be happy to share a research that we've done on, many, many different papers about um, etiology reasons, of this condition. And how often and that happens, all this epidemiological status, as well as physical suffering, mental suffering, economic suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's a most common disease that ruins patients' life, women's life, and physically, mentally, socially, even economically. If women doesn't go to work, and most people paid by hour, you just don't get paid.
Yeah.
Dependency. Most women don't have a normal social life. 35% of women don't have a sex life because of the fibroids. You know, can't have babies. Oh, babies. Fibroids number one reason for miscarriages. Of course, if you have a 30 some fibroids inside the belly, there will be no blood and space for the embryo.
Well, I made it a point to let them know that this is a billion-dollar industry cutting women open. And that was one of the conversations that I would have with my colleagues behind doors. I would say, there are people who are making decisions that affect women's ability to have children at a very early age. We are giving women hysterectomies. We are taking away their ability to be moms if they should so decide to be them. And at 20 and 30, those decisions shouldn't be taken from you.
It's
It's
called
it's
the
horrible.
Mississippi appendectomy. Mississippi appendectomy, and it's insulting because it's a appendectomy. It's like organ that doctors, we think, as far as we know, it's not important. So compare uterus to a not important organ is insulting. And I have seen database from Medicaid that shows some doctors have average age of hysterectomy patients in mid 20s.
Yes.
Mid 20s,
Hmm.
unreal. And even celebrities that part of Erica's circle and this, they suffered from fibroids. They were from age 23, they start to get offers for hysterectomy. So if Anika, we go to next step. Okay, we have some money for education, but unless state will say no more, hysterectomy is illegal. Illegal. It's offense unless all other options are evaluated.
I
It's not approved. Can we do that?
I don't think that we're going to have to go through the steps. Like, we're going to have to go through the steps over the next 3 years of pulling the data about what's taking place with women. In the legislature, we are emotionally driven at times. However, we are more data driven than we are emotionally driven. And I think that pulling the data and the stats on the surgeries that are taking place, the ages that are taking place, because it's going to show age, the type of surgery that's taking place, the area it's taking place in. So I think that after we go through, and this may sound very long, but in the scope of things, 3 years is not that long to be able to see what's taking place. But the
Right.
Okay.
big win for me was the options. They must mandatory. We are in the process of changing a portion of the law. We haven't changed it yet because the statute makes it so it has to be changed so that it is a recordable disease, just like that. And that is one of the things that I think people don't know is that any medical profession who comes across a woman with uterine fibroids must report and must give information about what their options and their choices are. So we haven't made it mandatory that you can't have a hysterectomy, but what we are making mandatory is that you are given information about what all your medical options are. And I think that is 100% better than where we stand now in the state of
Oh,
Florida.
Absolutely.
and amazing. I was just speaking with Erica before that. You know, we need to learn and talk with you about strategy because to get anything done, very difficult. And in the politics, close to impossible. And you got it done. So I'm sure there's a long-term plan. So
There
maybe
is
you can tell us how do you get it to the doctors? Because I'm sure doctors didn't hear about, don't know that they need to do this.
So it went into effect in July. It takes the policy team a little bit of time to get it all fully crafted. So our policy team presents it over to the health department. The health department works with the health and human services department. They kind of work together to make sure, because in Florida it's a separate. So you have the health department, and then you have the Florida Health Department, and then you have Health and Human Services. Don't ask me. At one point in time, I think they were together, but they're not anymore. So they work together to get the administrative things together. And part of the bill sets aside the first year, it's something like 600,000, a little over $600,000 to build the database, and then to educate the doctors, and then to educate the public on their options. Because part of it is that what we built this database, we're telling them they have to use it, but they have to now be educated on how to use it. There's a form that they'll be using that is a digital form. It is not a manual form that you have to fill out. It's a digital form that will go directly into the database from that medical doctor's office. So you have it's threefold. So you have the database, then you have the education of the doctors, and then the education of the community. So that's what the first year's funding is set towards.
And how do you educate doctors?
So the health department, I will not propose that I understand how they're going to educate doctors, but I can tell you that the amazing people within our health department, that not one of the people that that the people in the health department came across did not know someone who was affected by fibroids, or they were directly affected by fibroids themselves. So I know that my health department is going to put together a detailed, and let me just say this, Florida did not allow the gynecologist to control how information would be distributed. They could have tried to bypass me and gone to the Florida speaker and said, "Hey, we need this adjusted." The Florida speaker and the leadership team in the Florida House said no. The leadership team in the Senate said no. Me and Senator Gibson both said no, because we realized that if this would have been solved or fixed or done before, they would have. There's a reason why this information wasn't being passed out in great detail before, especially if you're saying, Dr. Yan, that they had it, and they were
30 years.
And
Everyone knows.
Yeah.
Anika, there's a system, and
Mhm.
every 2 years, doctors renew license. Because I'm a doctor, I know. We need
Yeah.
to renew the license. And every year we have a mandatory courses of this against abuse or these new things, and mandatory courses. It's like a small CME or course that you learn something, you pass the test, and when you pass it, then you can renew the license. And because it affects half of the women, up to 80% of Black women, by age of 50, it's a major thing. Nothing wrong for doctors to pass 5-minute test and learn about fibroids. And within 2 years, because every 2 years renewal, everyone will know about
But
this.
I don't think that it's going to be in a 2-year scenario. I think that what the health department is going to do is look at all the licensed medical professionals and ensure that all those licensed medical professionals are given the same information. That's the route that I believe that they're taking. Because if they wait for 2 years, then there's going to
Like
be
a letter, like
it's
a
a
letter
letter.
educational.
Yes, a packet. I believe there's going to be a packet that's designed and sent out to them, because it will be against the law if they do not report. It'll be against the law if they do not give the information. This is not a, oh, if you feel like. It's mandatory.
Mhm.
It's the law of the land. That
That's
passed that
that's
passed
phenomenal.
that passed unanimously in both chambers. It didn't get a zero, it didn't get a no vote in any of the three committees in either of the chambers. This is
Anika, is it possible for us to participate? Because we have probably the largest experience in the world with minimal invasive treatments, with the probably 15 times better outcomes that published because of consistency and data driven. We would love to participate and see how we can bring our nationwide experience to the benefit of Florida women.
so I think that one of the things that where I see, Dr. Yan, that you would play a major role is in the research portion of it, the research and education, because we have to partner with research institutions in reference to how do we, because you're saying there's information there, right? But when the health department went looking, there was no like clear cut,
Right.
this is what you should do, this is how you should navigate. There was none of that, because I asked them to do that in 2021. I didn't just move to propose legislation. If you think about it, 2015, I said, hey, we need to bring awareness to uterine fibroids, right? In 2016, we redid it again. My aunt left the Florida House of Representatives in 2018, but the time she was there, that actually, no, she left in 2016. So the time she was there, she kept that at the forefront. There's 2 years in between us. I ran for office in 2018 and won. So in 2018, I got to the Florida House, and the first thing I did was learn how the legislature operated. Then my next year, I learned how the executive branch operated, because I knew that I had to understand it to be able to get what I needed done. People ask me all the time why I ran for the legislature. One of the top reasons is to get this legislation passed. I knew that in order to do it, you needed to lay a trail. So I laid a trail before my time, then picked it up after I learned my craft. And in 2021, I looked at the health department and said, hey, can you pull the stats on the women who have uterine fibroids? Do we have it? They went to look, came back and said, Rep, the only stats we can pull are from the people who had the most acute scenarios, who've had to go to the hospital. We don't have anything else. And that's why it was important, because for me, Dr. Yan, it is important to prove that there is no information, so that now we can have the information. It's important to prove that we had no education being given out, so that now we can have the education being given out. But I am a master strategist. I play no games when it comes to getting something accomplished. And I do look forward to figuring out how we can have you work with the research portion of it. Because one of the things I'm afraid of is we wouldn't let the gynecologists control the narrative, right? And I have to be mindful of making sure that the space is open for all of the people who are medical professionals who treat women with uterine fibroids, because they will go back and say, oh, they locked us out, but they let Dr. Yan in. You know what I mean? So it's important to make sure it's
Wide open.
right.
Everyone needs to
That,
know.
because, and that is the part for me. But I do believe, and I said this to um, one of your team members when I talked to her on the phone, because I sent the email. I had my team send the email to your team. I didn't realize that Fibroids Fighters was connected to USA Fibroids, right? It wasn't until I had them go and pull the information to send the email over that I realized. But I was like, send this email to both. Send it to the company and send it to the nonprofit, because I need them to know what we did here in Florida. Because I did see that Senator Gibson was a part of that you knew about it passing. But I think that people don't understand this, the entire state of Florida. It's not just one portion of Florida. It's not a small research project. It affects the entire state of Florida, every county and every medical professional in it.
Anika, your steps are followed in other states. I think Georgia, some other states are trying to do the same. But I will better stop talking, because I'm sure Erica had many fabulous, important questions, and I was just jump in.
No,
into
no, no,
the
that's
conversation.
okay. I know how excited you get when we talk about this. I'm excited as well. So thank you so much for your enthusiasm. But, as we look at building this quantitative data to build a case for future laws to help fibroid patients, Dr. Yan, I know one of the discussions that we had briefly was about the actual patient experience. We have to look at it also from a healthcare insurance perspective, and how we would love to see some change in that area. I know myself, I frequently talk about having a stack of medical bills from all of my experiences with myomectomies, with miscarriages from myomectomy, from fibroids and things like that. So looking at potentially having no deductible for an ultrasound under laws such as the ones that that the representative helped to initiate. How can we use this data and use your influence, former representative, to help with that patient experience, to help with dealing with the insurance companies that are not giving these types of concessions for fibroid patients, because there are treatments, there are exams that are crucial to, especially the African American women, that are crucial to us when it comes to having fibroids, that should be something that is not only required, but something that is mandatory for physicians to do at little to no cost to the potential fibroid patient or the fibroid patient themselves. How can you help with that? How can lawmakers help with that?
I think that one of the things that I will be pivoting to after the first year of information, actually, I will be looking back at this in July, is to and I will be extending an olive branch to Dr. Yang to see if he is able to jump in and see how we can look at this short synopsis, because I think that by the time we get to July of 2023, which is the anniversary of Uterine Fibroids Awareness Month, Fibroids Awareness Month, we should have some information on what is taking place and be able to then I am like I said, this law is funded for 3 years. It is still the law of the land after the funding runs out, but I want to make sure that we look at it every 6 to 7 months to see what it is saying and see how then we can make things different. Like, I personally think that we should be doing ultrasounds from the moment I think, and I might be saying it wrong because I get ultrasound. I'm a non-medical professional, so bear with me. So I think that we should, when a girl is of age to go to a gynecologist, I think it's 13 or 14, I think it's around the time that she sees her first period, that we should be starting to do ultrasounds at that point in time. Because what I noticed is that I had friends who were 15 and 16 that had severe cramping and pain. And I think one of them knew that she had fibroids from high school. And these, to be suffering, you're missing class, you're in pain, and sometimes your parents have to come and pick you up when you're in high school, so that now it's affecting your educational level as a teenager, right? You can't explain this to your friends because sometimes in your own family no one has explained it to you. So I think that ultrasound should take place as early as when we start, and it should be done every year, because I don't know why we're waiting until these things are the size of footballs and cantaloupes and watermelons. It's very disturbing to hear that you're carrying a watermelon in your uterus when your uterus is supposed to be this cute little thing, and it's not, right? Because it has this growth. So I think that is some of the stuff that I will suggest as we go along in the process, because if we notice that we're finding out from the data that women are getting, and for me, it's always, my brain works a little different. So if I see that women are getting hysterectomies in their 20s and the data is showing that means that we should start doing ultrasounds when they're teenagers. You see what I'm saying? But I can't go and say they should start doing ultrasounds every year when they do their first checkup, because if I do that, then they're going to say, why are we doing that, representative? They still call me representative, but why are you doing that, representative? And then I'll be like, well, I'm doing it because we're seeing that the data is saying that we're having hysterectomies in our mid-20s. These things don't just pop up overnight. That means they had them in their teens. So now we can put forward the argument to have the legislation to make it mandatory or required for insurance companies to ensure that when we go for our well visit, that an ultrasound is connected with. You do a pap smear, you should have to do an ultrasound. You know what I mean? So that is where that comes in. It is not currently how the law is not included in the law. It's not structured in the law, but I think that's something that should be done. I also think that if you're having a myomectomy, that there should be an ultrasound after. You're doing a surgery on me and you're not going back in to see what's still in there. That's craziness to me. Like, when I finished my surgery, I was like, so are we gonna go look and see what's in there still? And they were like, oh no, we don't do that. I'm like, if you break an arm, they go back and they look to see if the arm is fixed properly. So why are we not going to see what's taking place? Dr. Yan, you can tell me why we're not, because I just think
So, Anika, your common
Dr.
sense
Yan,
is not very common.
okay.
Like a common sense, not very common. The way you structure is absolutely right, but it's a I can understand why other people don't think this way. I just want to maybe share a few facts, um, starting from ages and the difference between, unfortunate difference between black and white women. Between ages 18 to 30, this young 20 years old, even teenagers women, black women have a fibroid, symptomatic fibroid in about 26%, white girls 7%. But phenomenal age of 35, 40, amazing women age, right? Prime age 30, 60% plus 70% of women, black women, have this problem. Symptomatic fibroid disease that affect the life. Whites, 35, 40%. By age of 50, 45, 50, up to 80% black, 7% white. What does it mean, symptomatic? It means severe bleeding, pain, weakness. Maternal, what is bleeding? Losing hemoglobin. It leads to maternal death. I was recently in New
oh,
York speaking with
I didn't
people, and
connect that maternal
I
death.
listen.
I didn't connect
Apologize.
that.
I didn't connect this two because I
Okay.
didn't know that in Bronx, maternal death after labor is extraordinary high, and it's 8, 9 times more than in other places in a black woman.
Hmm.
And then suddenly it hit me, and it was uh, it was someone who is in charge of health department in Bronx. The doctor gynecologist was talking about this, and she was invitee and the invite speaker on our fibroid awareness event, uh,
Hmm.
a few months ago, and suddenly hit me. It's because they die from bleeding,
Hmm.
and they
Mhm.
die from bleeding. They said it's death from bleeding.
Yeah.
Why they die from bleeding? Because they start with a hemoglobin that's 7, 8, not 14, 15. They
Right.
already have half of the blood. If you lose half of the blood, what stays? Quarter, nothing. But if you have a full blood and you lose half of the blood, you'll be fine. We have a research on Jehovah's Witness,
Mm-hmm.
and they die from tooth extraction, hysterectomy, um, light car accidents, because they start from much lower hemoglobin. A black women with a Jehovah's Witness, because they bleed from fibroids. Blood transfusions not healthy. HIV, hepatitis, all those things not healthy. And I think Anika, after that, when women go through this, myomectomy. What is myomectomy? It's typical treatment, 1 or 2 myomectomies before hysterectomy. It's like harvesting women's condition for more and more services. That think about it's like a flare steak. They open up, scrape. I can assure you 1,000% it's not possible to remove it. Not all of it. Not
Mm-hmm.
possible. It's palliative, it's temporary solution. That's why nobody wants to look after that, because it's a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And the cost, just, so life is ruined, right? Physically suffering, no social life, no sex life, no kids, no good career. Cost, let's go put the government head, for example, and the cost from all those procedures, I estimate maybe $200,000 to $300,000. Instead of it, ultrasound is $100. Uterine fibroid embolization, I don't know, $8,000 to $9,000. So can you imagine that you can propose 20 or 30 to 1 ROI, just direct medical cost? Not 3 to 1, not 10%, 20 times ROI.
I 100% agree. But you know what? One of the things that we passed, or we made a focus in 2021, Dr. Yan, was figuring out why the Black maternal rate was as high as death rate was as high as it was. And so what you just said to me is I'm going to have a conversation with our health department to see if we can start to look at the correlations between the maternal.
Hemoglobin,
the
Anemia.
hemoglobin of the women who I mean, maybe we should be testing the hemoglobin. Do we test that before while women are
Yeah.
carrying?
Yeah, like
Because
before labor, you test, women get tests,
so
during
that
the
so there
process.
is some kind of record of that to be able to look at.
For sure.
Okay.
But but it's not but if they don't do ultrasound, so some women might have a diagnosis of fibroids, some not. But come on, let's put this unusual way your brain thinks, which called common
Yes.
sense. If someone bleeds and it's not cancer, it's most common, not 100%, but common reason is a fibroids.
It's the, for me, you just dropped a gem that had never shined on me before, which is that that's the reason why we're dying at a greater rate. And I'm sure that you're not the only uh, doctor that has come across this, but it has not been announced. It has not been talked about.
But
But can I tell you, one of the other things is that I don't think that this legislation would have passed the way it passed had I not focused on the numbers of my white counterparts who suffer from uterine fibroids. What took place for me was I had two of my colleagues whose wives almost lost their babies because the fibroid was
of
smushing the
course,
baby. And these colleagues of mine one happened to be in leadership, and the other one was not. But those two gentlemen, I know that I know from when I was talking about the bill that my colleagues that I was talking to about the bill had been or come into contact with someone who had it. And the, what I positioned it was you have to understand that this is affecting women's ability to produce, to have children, to do it's affecting quality of life. They don't think that it hit the men as much when you say, "Oh, I'm anemic and I feel tired and I'm weak." Not saying that men don't care, but I think that the idea of their
men
mom, their
doesn't bleed every month.
Right.
Men
I know, so
doesn't
it doesn't.
bleed.
So it doesn't. I don't think that that part was the part that got them. What got them was that women are having hysterectomies in their 20s and their 30s, and so they're not able to have children, and that is going to affect the population of the state of Florida. I
Yeah.
think that was more of what what pulled it together. And don't get me wrong, my colleagues, I love my colleagues. We all come from different parts of the state. We have different lived experiences. We have different current experiences, but they all agreed that women needed to have this bill.
Absolutely. And then also when you look at it from, the patient perspective, I know as a fibroid patient, a fibroid fighter, and as a documentarian, one of the things that I emphasize is making sure that the patients are armed with information as well, because if we can't solely rely on the doctors, because as conversations I've had with Dr. Young is doctors are people too. And
Yes.
so we have to educate ourselves on what it is, what our current needs are at that moment in time physically, so that we can communicate those needs to the doctors. The doctors do need to have an open line of communication with the patient and be willing to listen to the patient. I know as a patient, I've come across instances where the doctors felt like I didn't really need to have a say, and that was actually recently in my life. But if we understand, especially as African American women, what a low level of vitamin D means for us.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really discuss that with our doctors, and all of those things, all those deficiencies are directly related to how the fibroid symptoms affect our bodies, how our quality of life is diminished. So it's important for us to have that education. So, in terms of thinking about that, can you comment also, both of you, on how important it is to have those underrepresented markets, those women in those underrepresented communities receive this type of education, and what can we do about that? We can start with Anika. We can start with you.
So for me, I look forward to the I look forward to the state in 2021 put some resources towards uterine fibroids awareness month, right? So there were PSAs, and there were things in medical offices that were put up, and all the health departments did a big splash of it, right? So I'm looking to figure out how to leverage it even more, because not every woman has access to medical care, right? We know that in under resourced communities, that people don't have access to the same level of care, right? It's just the reality. So part of my mission, it will be to figure out how to continue to educate through formats like Fibroids Fighters, and sharing your information when you're having your break the silence conversations, and sharing that information, but also making sure that the health department continues its push of pushing out resources and making Uterine Fibroids Awareness Month. Um, we need to make it as strong as we've made other diseases that affect women. We have to make it to the point where women are feel empowered enough to uh, demand certain things. Like I did not get the support, and I don't think Senator Gibson did either. The support that we should have gotten for legislation like this. Like there should have been tons of women pouring into these committees discussing how fibroids have affected their lives. We didn't have that. And I asked Senator Gibson to carry this legislation because she's such an amazing diplomat. Like I'm a diplomat in the Florida House, right? Like I'm a Democrat. I'm not in the majority. In order to get something accomplished, I have to talk to my colleagues. You know what I mean? And she also had that. And we had worked on other bills together that dealt with education. And so I came to her not knowing that she had been affected by uterine fibroids at all. I just knew that she would be able to carry this for us on the Senate side. So I think for me, the major mission for me is to leverage the health department's work and research to bring to, now that women are seeing that when they go to their doctor's office, it's not some silent secret. I think we'll also empower them to realize that they have choices and voices, and to start to look um, at their options and then become a little bit more active. I think that your organization, your nonprofit, Fibroids Fighters, has given a diverse face to uterine fibroids. I don't think that um, I don't think that Black women immediately motivate people to solve critical disease issues. Because if we did, then we would have solved the issue of sickle cell a long, long time ago, and we haven't, right? So it's important for me to make sure that all the women who are affected by uterine fibroids have a chance to speak their story, as you have done with your organization, but also for them to see themselves in it, so they can continue to advocate. We can continue to advocate for ourselves. Because some of this awareness is going to have to be done on a level of people to people, and some of it the health department will support because they have resources to do so. So you have done it way better than I have done in the state of Florida. I'm not really good at I'm good at getting stuff passed. I'm not necessarily good at marketing. So I'm begging on air to see how we can further this conversation.
Anika, we really like in our, it's part of USA Clinics Group. We have more than 160 locations in 26 states. We have 38 locations in New York City alone.
Mm-hmm.
And we have all over the Florida. And we focused on cure, not care. Business of medicine, it's all about recurrent treatments, diabetes, heart. People come forever. It's never ends spend and never ends revenue. We really in a bad business. We in the cure. People come, we fix, they don't need to see us again. But that's what we want. That's why we in underserved communities, Tamarack is not West Palm Beach, right? Okay, so and Hialeah neither. And so we in because we want to make a difference. So we can make a difference, and we need to understand our customers are those women, normal people that suffer every day, and we can make a difference for them. We can make a difference for insurances. We can make a difference for employers. Like right now, probably fibroid disease is number one reason for absenteeism, not going to work. When you don't have uh, people to work, right? Labor shortage, and women, which work very, very hard, they cannot come to work because and say I have a headache because they don't tell everyone, oh, I have a terrible bleeding. They just, I have a flu, I have a headache, something like this. So I think that's going back to Erica, to your question. We would try it, right? And now non-for-profit organization to bring awareness through chapters, local chapters, through speaking in congregations, bringing patients for educational activities to our office, even free consultation, free screenings. We work in, I think, with the, Bronx Department of Health, maybe 1,000 free ultrasounds or screening ultrasounds. And I even think maybe every woman should have a life kind of improvement plan, like how to live your best life. So if we'll bring it through education early on, I think we should be able to prevent waste of lives or
Yeah,
the best life
Absolutely.
women can have.
Absolutely. Thank you
100%.
so much. I'm sorry, go ahead.
100%, Dr. Yan, and you just gave me a thought in reference to one of the things that I can work on. It, is before the kids get out of school, is to go through and do those educational
Like
forums.
a sex education, health
Yeah.
education,
Hmm.
we'll have a fibroid education. And Anika, we'll definitely need to talk after this. And I think I'll share the information and you'll teach me your
Oh, I think you
I,
froze.
what do we need to do to get it done?
I look forward to it. I think that um, when you look at Texas passed a law also, but they haven't moved forward with gathering their database. We may need to go back into Texas and have a conversation with their policy people as to why they passed a law, funded a law, and it hasn't produced what Florida has in a shorter space of time. Like we there is legislative work that needs to be done. I think if we captured California and New York, now you have the four largest states that have passed it. It will place a lot of,
And we everywhere, 15
Mhm.
location in Texas as well. So
yeah,
in
no.
California,
Oh, I know. I've seen your footprint, Dr. Yan. But what I'm saying is, if we pass this legislation in those two states, now the big four have passed it. It will
everyone
make
will follow.
Exactly.
that was the mission.
Yeah.
We're going to complete it. It can be done quickly, I think, if we just.
So you're not retiring, right, Anika?
I'm retired from the Florida legislature, but I am not retired from being a public servant because I believe
Awesome.
that we deserve to live a life of.
Thank you
Thank
both
you.
incredibly so much for your passionate dedication as champions in this fight against fibroids. We sincerely appreciate that. And Anika, thank you so much for breaking your silence and passing laws that will break the behavior of fibroid treatment thus far, and hopefully building a paradigm shift in the educational field and also with legislators when it comes to the treatment of fibroids. So thank you both. You are both, really wonderful assets to this conversation. And we hope to continue the conversation. We hope that what you've done at the state level will continue to be contagious throughout the country so that we can finally get the Stephanie Tubbs Jones Uterine Fibroid Research and Education Act passed. We sincerely hope that that will be the effort and the outcome for years to come. Years to come.
That's
So
the.
thank you so much. Thank you once again to you both. We look forward to the continued conversation and also our next conversation on Break the Silence, Break the Behavior. I'm Erica Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you
Bye
very
Thank
bye.
you.
much.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.